the Cuban regime has come to the conclusion that they cannot survive under the current economic model, that the world is becoming globalized economically and that they need to be part of it.
This is At Brookings, a weekly in-depth look at issues behind the news. This week, economic reforms in Cuba.
Cuba is well known for its rich culture, stellar system of medical education, and an economy that has struggled for decades to meet the needs of its people. But last year, the island nation's communist government approved a series of economic reforms, notes senior fellow Ted Piccone.
The economic reform process has certainly taken on its current momentum since Raúl came to power in 2006, when Fidel Castro fell ill. Under Fidel Castro, they began a series of economic reforms allowing individuals to create their own jobs, their own little businesses, but it was never seen as blessed by the Communist Party. It was seen as quite a negative necessity.
Ted, is this a case of goodbye communism, hello capitalism?
In terms of the economic system, it would be goodbye communism, hello socialized capitalism, where the state will continue to provide a safety net for the most needy, but for everyone else, it will be a different Cuba. This is a strongly centralized, top-down system. Communist Party remains firmly in control. Raúl and his cohort have decided that we need to move in the direction of China, we need to move in the direction of Vietnam and have some kind of economic opening to the rest of the world. We need to create jobs for people. We can't just depend on the state, and so we need to move into a different kind of model.
A different kind of model? How different? What can be expected going forward?
You're seeing new businesses created in a whole range of areas. Individuals and companies can now go to banks and borrow money. You couldn't do that before. So they can actually, have some resources to start their businesses. People can now sell their houses. They can sell their cars. They couldn't do that until recently. So there's a creation of capital and equity in the system that the leaders hope will create the kind of economic engine that will allow the state to downsize, to become more efficient, and to allow people some kind of livelihood going forward. The society is getting older. There's still a large out-migration, so they need to find ways of sustaining some kind of economic growth that doesn't just depend on the state.
Okay, so that's the economic side. Are there political changes in the offing as well?
Current leaders have anything to say about it? No. There is no interest in political reform. The head of the economic reform process publicly just said that we have no intention to create or institute any political reforms going forward, that this will remain politically a centralized communist-run system. They don't believe in political parties. There is one political party, it's the Communist Party. They have no intention of allowing that kind of competition in the political system. The key question there is whether the Cuban people will use the economic liberties that are being created for them to trying to create political space.
The Catholic Church's role and influence has been greatly diminished under the Castro regime, but it does have a role to play as these economic changes are unfolding. What is that role?
The Catholic Church has been slowly trying to build some greater independence and ability to found their own schools. It hasn't been approved yet, but they're trying. They've played an important role in negotiating the release of political prisoners and in allowing a group of women whose husbands were in jail for political reasons to protest on the street under very limited conditions. So the Catholic Church is finding its voice. It's doing it in a very careful and cautious way, which is raising a lot of criticism from people who would like to see change happen more quickly.
You've called the U.S.-Cuba relationship the last remnant of the Cold War. What do you mean by that?
The United States should be engaged in this process of economic reform, but instead it has decided to continue to wait for the day when the regime will collapse and we'll be able to march in and create a new Cuba. It's not going to work like that, in my view, and it's going to be a process of slow, incremental change, and the United States should start moving on board. Now, President Obama has, I think, taken some important positive steps in allowing more travel, and allowing Cuban Americans in particular to travel at their own freedom with really very little restrictions. They may send remittances and gift parcels of any amount, and this is providing a real resource for their families back in Cuba.
The economic policies in Cuba are exciting and arguably good for the country, for everyone in the country. How effective can we expect them to be?
This is a slow motion process of change, and we just won't know, I would say, for another year or two, if these kinds of reforms will take hold and give the economic oxygen that is needed for people to get by and just maintain their standard of living. We will see if the self-employment rules and the selling of property and some of the examples I mentioned earlier will create some independent income for individuals so they're not so dependent on the state. This is the beginning of political reform, possibly, and this should be encouraged.
Stay up to date with the latest research, learn about Brookings events, and search our directory of experts, all from your mobile device. To download Brookings for your BlackBerry, Android, iPhone, or iPad, go to brookings.edu/mobile.